What's up, guys? With Shrimp Po' Boy Savage. Today I'm coming at you on the channel with To EFI or Not to EFI Episode 2. It's been a long time coming, but I was looking for citations, references, and shit like that in order to, looking for more of those in order to further the points in number 1 and number 2. Now they are the same references but a bit expanded, unless I've already edited the to EFI or Not to EFI episode 1. I don't know if I have. I don't think I have, but I may have. If I didn't, I'll do that as soon as possible with the same references down here. Anyhow, without further ado, you know what's almost comical? Yeah, not only was Uncle Tony from Uncle Tony's Garage correct about fuel injectors, but it's comical that they use this as an excuse to jump ship onto the newfangled squirt nozzle pieces that were originally meant for hot bulb engines, other heavy oil engines, and diesel engines in question. But what he said about it, EFI, the modern version of the squirt nozzles, the electronic controlled EFIs, being an overly complicated quote-unquote solution to the vapor lock issue with carburetors as gasoline got reformulated over and over. This is correct. The comedic, almost comedic element is the using it to justify just jumping ship instead of actually looking at what they can fix and what they could, how they can, what they can address. Well, here comes a Castizo Coon-ass from, or Cajun, as it's also the term coon-ass is a swap-in for. Know if you're chocolate skin, don't get all screechy on me. This is what we call each other. We call each other coon-asses. So here, somebody like me from the sticks, in the hillside, surrounded by forestry in the North Louisiana woods, coming to you with the 5 fundamental things to deal with the vapor lock issue. Now, the first one is going to be the use of vapor separator filters. Uncle Tony's Garage, there's a video, I'll link it down below. I think Thunderhead 289 might have one. There are other channels that might have them too. You can find these. You can look them up. But I'll link Uncle Tony's video down here just for reference. 2. Thermal insulation applied to the fuel pumps regardless of whether they're mechanical or electronic. And the reason is very simple. Engine heat can saturate the fuel pump. That can heat up the gasoline and actually make it boil inside while it's trying to pump. So that can actually be a problem for the fuel pump over time. And that leads to an instance of vapor lock. 3. A pressure regulator right before the carburetor that's tuned down to the lowest pressure for the engine, without having performance issues like some of us who were old enough to who had dads that could be old enough to potentially need performance enhancement just to knock our mothers up. Fortunately, in my case, that was not the case. No, before I get to 5, I'm going to go 4. Sorry for jumping ahead. 4. A proper fuel return system that ensures the gasoline stays cool as it gets returned to the fuel tank. Now, and I'm emphasizing the gasoline staying cool if you have an intention to preheat your gasoline before it goes to the pressure regulator just before the carburetor. And use means to maintain the heat at 100 120 degrees to 115 degrees at the lowest Fahrenheit. The best way to do this fourth mod is to use 2 pressure regulators. Have a pressure regulator like a propane regulator or whatever just before the carburetor, and then have a pressure regulator with a fuel bypass where you can start the return line to your fuel to gas tank with, being the first fuel regulator. Then in between those 2 regulators, that's where your preheating can happen with no problems and minimize the work you need to do that. And so the output gasoline from the bypass regulator goes through preheating and then to the propane regulator in this case. Keep it simple. It'll work. That preheated gasoline then can be routed straight to the float bowl in the carburetor and be ready to use and make more easy banging, more pow, right? It's easier to vaporize because it's already warm. So the best example of fuel bypassing a regulator would be the Quick Fuel Technology 30-900QFT Quick Fuel Bypass Regulator. You'll find that on Amazon, which I'll link that down below. This particular mod I've learned about from Luke Thunderhead 289. He actually had a channel there. He's got it. He has a channel. I'll link that video down below. Now, the last modification you could use for a carburetor to address any potential instances for vapor lock, for the most part, I will start talking about it now. It's called the carburetor enhancer system. It was first put forth by George Wiseman, trying to come up with economic, fuel-saving, combustion-enhancing technology that didn't require 16 to 17 grand of capital to put into experimenting to make basically a thermal catalytic cracking unit to make natural gas and propane vapors out of gasoline, which George Wiseman's brother found out. That's something a lot cheaper, a lot more practical for a lot more people. So he figured this little trick out for carburetors. Through trial and error. And then wrote it down and showed diagrams for people how to do it, and then started selling it online. Both the enhancer kit and the manual. What it is a method that controls the absolute air pressure in the float bowl, so there's not such a great pressure difference between the float bowl, the venturi, and the intake. This allows you to control the fuel intake of your engine without touching any of the other carburetor's controls. That's pretty advantageous, if I do say so myself. You can control your fuel flow at any time or way you choose without messing with any of the other controls on the engine, even the emissions controls, which is also a big. By applying a vacuum in the float bowl, you can cut back on the amount of fuel flowing into the engine by sucking on the other end of the siphon tube. The beauty of this system is that it enhances the emulsion or foaming and frothing action that the air bleeds enact on the gasoline when you're under vacuum, because the air is going through them, which allows you to spit out a finer spray of the air into the airstream, raising the surface area of the fuel. So, promoting more vapor, evaporating, creating more vapor from less fuel. So, to simplify all that, it just basically froths your gasoline harder, so it breaks the fuel down by frothing it harder, so the fuel foaming breaks into tinier droplets. They vaporize more quickly and more easily. So, more vapor, less liquid fuel. Those are both good. And next thing the carburetor enhancer does is it allows more precise metering of the fuel, because the carburetor can be then balanced. Balancing refers to the balancing of the pressure difference between the float bowl again and a venturi again and the intake. So they'll be under control and to your benefit at that point. Think of it this way: you got a stream of fuel and you got an air balloon shooting into it. Well, imagine you lower how much fuel's flowing through the stream, and you keep the air sucking through that straw, or sucking through that air blade going into that fuel stream line. You keep this air velocity or speed or quickness the same, but you cut how much fuel you let go into that stream. Well, you'll have the fuel broken up a lot more finely, way finer breakup of the gasoline. And there are other ways of examples I can give you, but this is how to think of it, right? You have another major advantage with this method over just reducing the size of your main jets, because it only cuts back the fuel when you're not using power. As soon as you need power, the moment you push that gas pedal, you got it. This method of cutting back on fuel is completely different than leaning your idle screw mixture or your throttle mixture screws. I don't recommend leaning any of those. I recommend using this method because it'll actually cut back on the liquid gasoline while maintaining the air to fuel vapor ratio. Because you got to remember, your gasoline goes into your cylinders as a mixture of vapor and liquid swirling in the air and being tossed around by the air. Increasing the amount of gasoline vapor going into the cylinders, or just lowering the liquid while maintaining the same vapor ratio, is the way to go. But the problem with the first one is you're better off just maintaining the vapor ratio, but just calming down on how much liquid's thrown in. Because you increase the vapor enough, it will flood the engine. That's what it won't be able to start. It's suffocated, if you will. That's what flooding is. Vapor, too much vapor, not enough air mixing. You can pump a shit ton of liquid gasoline through your engine as long as it doesn't vaporize, theoretically. That won't flood your engine. So when you promote fuel vaporizing, you must cut back on the fuel volume or you will flood the engine. The carburetor enhancer lets you cut back on the fuel while promoting the vaporizing. You still maintain the vapor fuel ratios you're supposed to run on. That's how it works. The carburetor enhancer also allows the option for fuel flow to the engine to be totally cut off when you let off the gas pedal. And you start slowing down, if you wish. One advantage is that those people that have the foaming vapor lock problem won't have it anymore, and for a lot of different reasons at the carburetor and intake side, vapor lock is going to go away for them in this area. The last advantage of the carburetor enhancer is you can also allow vapor to be pulled out of the gas tank, mixed with air, and then mixed with the intake charge to then be used. So you prevent gasoline fuming and gasoline vaporizing in the tank from contaminating the atmosphere through the vent tube. Yeah, the vent tube is good to have because it works. It works to only allow vapors of gas to go into the atmosphere, but stops other shit from going into the tank. So you want to keep that, but you'll keep it as a sealing, as a container seal. But that also enables you to allow your vacuum collection of vapor, boil off vapor, to actually go into the engine, so it won't go in the environment. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I will give you one last note. All of these modifications can be worked with an electronic control modified carburetor. Yes, there are ways of doing that. Ooh, sorry, my jaw just popped. And if you use the right technology with OBD2 technology, and you adopt your oxygen sensors, your MAP sensor, and you install those, and you install an air intake temperature sensor and oxygen sensor before and after the catalytic converter, and you do all this, and you do all these things, okay, and you adopt these modernizations of these particular components and modernize an ECU for this, you can also use the electronic carburetor enhancer. And the electronic carburetor enhancer with modern electronic sensor tech and all that stuff, and with an actual means to read the engine and all these other things, you can make electronic carburetor enhancer expanded upon and make it able to be adopted to the scan gauge technology, which I will link below. When you do this, you want this and a vacuum gauge for to go to your dash. And the reason I say this is because you drive within the vacuum and you look at the scan gauge, miles per gallon, you're going to see the real results better than on that speedometer at the dash. And it's going to be more precise. You can half-ass computerized carburetors without anything digital outside the primitive digital aspects of the scan gauge. This is probably the only bending room you have for the illegality of hacking the computerized components of a vehicle, because you can't, it's illegal to do that. Building up to this point with the carburetor side of things, that's probably your only legal exception. But I will warn you, another thing before I go, that when you do all these mods, you will have a bit of a cooler exhaust, so you'll want to insulate the exhaust pipe and the front half of the catalytic converter. That's the half that's facing the engine. With heat shield technology, they have a reflective insulative. They have an insulation that they can put on catalytic converters to maintain all the necessary heat to have them running and doing what they need to do. And they will the oxygen sensors won't need to be cleaned as often, and the catalytic converters will last longer because there's less shit to scrub because you made the burning of fuel better in the first place. So with that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.